the negotiations between Israel and Hamas over the release of the hostages or some of the hostages and an end to hostilities is ongoing, but the negotiator is a different person now, or at least one of the negotiators. He's not actually sitting in the rooms in Qatar. He's sitting somewhere like a rat in a tunnel. And yes, before you tell me, I know, apologies to the rats for the comparison. But Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of October 7th, is now the leader of Hamas after the previous leader went to meet his virgins, and uh, there's nobody knows the value of hostage exchange deals more than Yahya Sinwar. He was released in one over a decade ago when Gilad Shalit, the Israeli soldier who had been held by Hamas for 5 years, was released, and Israel released over 1,000 terrorists, including convicted murderers, including Sinwar himself. Of course, he that only helps you among the Palestinians if you have committed atrocities and then are able to be released quicker than some pickpockets would be released without the backing of a major international terrorist organization. So yeah, this is where we have come from October 7th when Sinwar's people invaded Israel, occupied some parts of Israel for a little bit, slaughtered Israelis, took Israelis hostage, from Israel saying we will destroy Hamas, to Israel now negotiating with the mastermind of the October 7th attacks. Welcome to the reality show. I am joined by Daniel, Marco, Richard. Richard, your thoughts on this latest development?
Yeah, well, I mean, Sinwar is the face of October the 7th, isn't he? He's the trademark, he's the brand of it. He's the Osama bin Laden of October the 7th. And if you would consider a comparison of, nine months, 10 months after 9/11, Osama bin Laden suddenly being the head of a country or a region, it would drive the message home, I think. It's quite shocking, to be honest. And of course, it was so much easier for the Western press when they had the two different roles, when they could present the military role of Sinwar as one thing, the Hamas version of that, but the political, suit-wearing machinations of Haniyeh, is particularly outside of Gaza itself, as the other side of that. And now, of course, you've got that thrown in your face. And yet the Western media is quite able, really, from what I've read of it so far, to get over the fact that Sinwar is now the leader, even if they have to cover within their profiles of him and some of their swift biogs his horrendously violent and hideous past, and present, quite frankly. So it's a shocking and yet not shocking development, depending on who you are and how much attention you've been paying.
Yeah, I mean, the issue about the hostages is a very, very emotional thing, especially for a family involved. And I understand that they would like to see anything done in order to recover the loved person who's held hostage by the people of Gaza. However, if you just focus on the short term, yes, you might agree some kind of deal with the people who actually kidnapped the people in the first place. But in the long term, you just embolden them. And what they've done, the kind of signal that they sent by replacing Ismail Haniyeh, since he was Mailanian, with this guy, effectively putting the guy who designed and plotted October 7 attack, put it in at the head of the political arm of Hamas, is effectively signaling, we don't care about you, look at this guy, he's now leader now. You have to deal with him if you want to do anything, any kind of negotiation or stuff like that. And of course, we said it a number of times, the only winner in a negotiation with this kind of people, with these terrorists, with these monsters, the people who caused October the 7th, that slaughtered, butchered one by one over 1,000 people and took 300 hostages, nearly 300 hostages. The only winners, it's them, it's the savages, it's the evil people that you effectively empowering. If you sit at the table with them, you treat them like equals. You just cannot be allowed to happen. And they know this perfectly. They exploit this fact that we are weak morally on this issue, and they effectively, spit in Israel's face by replacing the political leader with a guy who caused all this in the first place.
Daniel.
Yeah, so in preparation for this, I read my favorite news source, Al Jazeera, who actually did a short bio about Yahya Sinwar, I think pretty much like very soon after we knew he would become the new head of the Hamas political bureau. And I think it was very well done in the sense that it's a very good propaganda because we know basically when it comes to news sources, we know Palestinians almost pretty much exclusively only read Al Jazeera. And this was Al Jazeera English, the sort of like more moderate text. And even in that one, it went through his sort of bio. So he helped establish a network to fight against Israel. And this network later became the Al-Qassam Brigades, the military wing of Hamas. When Hamas was formed, he pretty much joined as soon as it was founded. He read the charter, he saw about, it's basically about killing Jews, and he just couldn't wait to join in. But soon after that, I think like year or 2 years after that, he orchestrated an abduction and killing of 2 IDF soldiers. He was caught and he was imprisoned for basically few decades until the negotiations for IDF soldier happened, where he was released. After that, he pretty much quickly rose through the ranks until he basically now is the actual head of Hamas. Something that was really interesting in the article that was at the end. So sort of, what should you take away from Yahya Sinwar when you're done with this article? So it actually had a quote from a 2021 interview with Yahya Sinwar. And in that he said, "For long periods, we tried peaceful and popular resistance. We expected that the world, free people, and international organizations would stand by our people and stop occupation from committing crimes and massacring our people. Unfortunately, the world stood by and watched." And then Al Jazeera has mentioned that he was likely describing the Great March of Return when he said, "We tried peaceful and popular resistance." So just for people who don't know, this has happened in 2019. So I don't know what he means by "we tried sort of popular," and even this one, which sort of started as in a sense like peaceful, was hijacked by Hamas and used to basically attack Israelis and attack the border whenever they could. But again, what is this like peaceful and popular resistance for a long time? Before that, you had I mean, Hamas has been launching rockets into Israel as soon as it took over Gaza. Before that, you had the Second Intifada. Before that, you had the First Intifada. Before that, you had many different wars where, well, that was before Hamas, but many different wars where the Palestinians tried to basically genocide all the Jews, or at least destroy Israel and basically get rid of Jews in the area. Where is this peaceful resistance? And now again, he's, some people, we sort of don't know what's really going on with the negotiations. I've read somewhere that apparently, something we know is I think he was long opposed to the negotiations, basically when Ismail Haniyeh was still in power. After he took over, there were some talks that he's gonna make it impossible to negotiate. I've read some articles today that he is okay with negotiating. So we don't know, but you shouldn't judge people by what they said today or yesterday. You should judge them by their actions. And we know what are the actions of Yahya Sinwar. He is the orchestrator of October 7. And we shouldn't even trust him if he says he wants peaceful and popular resistance. Because if whatever it was before, this interview was before October 7, by the way. So if whatever there was before October 7 was peaceful and popular resistance, then yeah, I'm not looking forward to any sort of peaceful and popular resistance coming from Palestinians again.
Yeah, I mean, we know who he is and what he is, and so does Western media. And Richard, you mentioned, they still manage to write bios for him that are maybe showing him in a more favorable way. I mean, look, it's been less than 2 weeks since we saw the obituaries for Ismail Haniyeh, mentioning that he was a moderate, and yeah, and again, it's always good to compare those to how they report on Netanyahu. You will never hear them reporting that way on Netanyahu, and viewers of this channel know I'm no fan of Netanyahu, but I would take Netanyahu over any of those savages any day of the week. Of course, that goes without saying, should go without saying to anybody in the West, and yet, yeah, when you see the media, when you see politicians criticize any leader in the Middle East, it is almost always Netanyahu who is criticized, and not the way we criticize him, criticized for not letting the savages get away with it completely, but doing a little bit here and there to prevent them from doing what they want. The fact that we got here to this point where Sinwar is the leader of Hamas and Israel is negotiating with Hamas after October 7th, was done by Hamas with Sinwar as the mastermind, is a journey that is surprising only to people who have not been following what's going on. It's definitely not surprising to people who were viewers of this channel on October 7th or October 8th when we were saying exactly what's going to happen here. We were talking about how Israel could and should act immediately while the world is, saying Israel has a right to defend itself and so on, which of course it still says. I've seen Kamala Harris on several different occasions, by the way, say Israel has a right to defend itself. There's always a but. And she doesn't even think maybe I'll add some sentences, maybe I'll use a different word. Maybe I'll it's very clearly she's saying she's clearly paying lip service to Israel has a right to defend itself, and then explaining why Israel should not defend itself. So October 7th, October 8th is when Israel could have gotten away in this sense with doing at least a lot of what needed to be done without any sort of, probably some criticism, but without any of the long-term problems that have been caused to Israel. This is still the right thing to do, even when diplomatically you're going to be hurt and economically probably as well. But it is still not something that Israel is willing to do. And so, yeah, we got from we're going to destroy Hamas to the point where there's a negotiation. It's clear that one of the outcomes of this negotiation, if there is a so-called deal, is allowing Hamas to remain in power in Gaza. That is a part of this deal that the world is advocating for, including the U.S. And people who watched yesterday's episode of the Daily Objective. It was, what was the title exactly? It was Iran and the U.S. What was it, Daniel? Do you remember? Iran and America unite against Israel, I think was the title. And we addressed right at the start the issue that people will see this as clickbait and why it's not. We still got comments saying it's clickbait. But I started that episode with a statement from the Iranian ambassador to the UN advocating for a ceasefire in Gaza, sounding like Kamala Harris, sounding like Joe Biden, sounding like Keir Starmer. this is now the position of Hamas, of Iran, and of the U.S. and Israel's other so-called allies, and that position is the position that Hamas should stay in power, that Israel does not have a right to defend itself, and that maybe Israel can do a little bit more things after the next October 7th, and then we will go back to accusing them of genocide. Richard.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand. I read an article a few days ago from the BBC, which was called "Behind the Scenes as Hamas Change its New Leader" by a let's call him a journalist, as the BBC do, by a guy called Rushi Abu Alouf. Now, this was a BBC journalist who was at the Qatar meeting where Hamas was choosing Sinwar to replace Haniyeh. And with photograph of them all gathered there, like he's covering a US primary or a party political conference or something, and talking to various people in the room. Now, to me, the photograph looked like it should have had a big target mark on the middle of it, and it should have been wiped out in one go by Israel, and that would have moved things on somewhat. But of course, it's in Qatar, which is why they wouldn't do that to start with. But within that, he spoke to a number of people within the organization. Not all of them named, of course, but he talked about the fact that some people would have preferred a moderate, allegedly. But this can be read as spin, that there are moderates within Hamas, and we shouldn't all treat them like a bunch of evil Sinwars. But of course, some of them were quite happy to speak out for Sinwar. One of them said this quote, gave this quote to the BBC journalist. He said, "We voted for him because we, quote, honor him for masterminding the attacks. October the 7th belongs to him, so he deserves to lead the movement." And that is, it's his reward. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. His reward for October the 7th is the leadership role. There was another person who was essentially one of his rivals, one of the possibilities who could have also led Hamas, a guy who I don't know whether you know, Razi, or know of, called Abu Omar Hassan, otherwise known as Mohammed Hassan Darwish. I don't know why they always have two names, but who's the head of the Supreme Shura Council. And he was described as a shadowy figure. And one of the reasons that he wasn't picked, according to this BBC journalist, was the fact that he's not a recognized face outside of the Hamas movement. And what they wanted was the big symbol of Sinwar as the leader. Because, I mean, all of us know his face in the same way that people know, as I mentioned before, Osama bin Laden's face post 9/11. So it's a PR move and a look how strong we are move, and also with all the Western media coming along to whitewash or at least present him as less evil than he is, and not call this out as an absolute aberration and that all negotiations should be cancelled because this is proof of the evil that runs right through Hamas and the Palestinian side of this. Then, because they haven't done that, it's clear that this PR stunt works. That is ever so depressing.
Sinwar is a dangerous guy because he's quite clever. He learned Hebrew in order to be able to see what happens on the other side. He learned about, I think he read biographies of former Mossad people just to try and gather information from it. And with that, he kind of informed the structure and the operation within Hamas itself. And again, Hamas, how many times have they said, like the quote that Richard read, how many times have they said that they want to destroy Israel and kill the Jews? How many times have we pointed out that Hamas have been actually elected with a charter that they had in the beginning of 2005, 2006, with a clearly, openly genocidal charter. And they were elected because of that, not despite of that. And how many times they told us that they want to destroy the Jews, they kill every Jews. And how many times this guy who's now the negotiator, allegedly sitting around the table, has said that he wants a one-state solution, a Muslim state solution. How many? And this is the guy that now the press is calling as a a legitimate figure who is supposed to be at the table dictating the negotiation. Again, negotiation for what? Negotiation that in the long term, just see the outcome of the 2011 negotiation, release of one IDF soldier. He was released. He was in prison. He should have been in prison, should have rotted in prison, but he was released because of one deal that was cut. And that's exactly what happens. Every time you deal with these people, they will come back to haunt you because they will benefit from any deal. You might get a few you might get to liberate a few of the hostages held by the Gazans, but in the long term, they will take more and more hostages because they by then they will have learned that taking hostages pays big dividend to them, and that's why they keep doing it.
Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, just to build upon the point Richard made about why they picked the Sinwar, I think the main reason is he is popular. I mean, again, I like polling data, and we have polls of the Palestinians. They still largely support October 7. Yes, Sinwar, because of that, has enjoys a great amount of popularity. He is popular among the Palestinian people. As you said, he is the symbol. He is the face of Hamas. But what does that symbolize? Or in a sense, he's the symbol Palestinians want, and we should judge them based on that. If this is basically who you want to represent you, you will get the response because of that. I mean, again, like we said, he was the mastermind behind October 7, and yeah, he is. Sorry, I have a.
All right. It could be Daniel is not in the UK, so I don't think that was the police knocking on his door for hate speech. But yeah, do you want to continue?
Yeah, sorry, I just had someone. I might have to jump again. But I think that is the main point, that Yahya Sinwar is popular, and Palestine, and this is what Palestinians want, and you should take their word for it.
Yeah, and that's another thing when they when we read in the media about how Israel is evil in attacking the Palestinians, about how Israel is attacking schools and innocent civilians die, and of course they give us Hamas's numbers, but really the numbers aren't the point one way or the other, unless you're trying to make a point from a perspective that treats all people equally, regardless of who they chose to be. And of course, in this case, we know from Israeli reports, 31 terrorists were eliminated. And so, but that doesn't show up anywhere. But yeah, that is a part of the attempt to tell us that the Palestinian people are not who the Palestinian people tell us they are. And that's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing thing in Western media, but it's very much an ongoing thing in Israel that with the Israeli left, it's always been very strong. But it is what informs the leadership, even when the Israeli so-called right is in power and has been for most of the last 25 years or so. They follow these policies, which of course, was something I addressed in my Substack article, which if you haven't read yet, there is a link for that in the description. There will be one in the live chat. It's a story of somebody who dedicated her life to this cause and gave her life to this cause when the Palestinians showed her who they are. So there was a question here I also wanted to address. Susie asks, wonder when the rest of the civilized world will realize this is their war too, and Israel is merely the first responder. Well, some people will realize it when they look out the window and see a mushroom cloud. For some people, it'll be too late to realize that. Some people might have a moment before it's too late. But yeah, that is the current trajectory. Now, again, this can of course change, which is why you should read and share my Substack article and these shows. But it is a very, very long journey from where we are now to realizing the who the enemy is on time. And we are focused on very different things internally. Everywhere in the UK, we have these riots. In the US, there are, that America has its own issues. In Israel today, I was looking at the news, and Gallant, the defense secretary, defense minister, issued some statement about Netanyahu, and then Netanyahu issues a statement, like a formal statement through his spokesperson about his own defense secretary. Now you can imagine, even if rational people are sitting around a table in a government meeting, there might be a back and forth and disagreement, but the idea of doing this publicly is such a I don't understand what anybody thinks. Is there nobody telling Netanyahu, do not do this through your spokesperson? Pick up the phone, talk to him. If it's too bad, then just fire him. And then you can make a statement. But Israel's enemies can see Israel's prime minister and Israel's defense secretary arguing publicly while they are planning their attack on Israel. So yeah, no, I don't think, Susie, that we are coming anytime soon to see the point of us realizing the problem anywhere in the West outside of Israel. And I don't think people in Israel are ready to really recognize the problem and deal with it. Otherwise, we would not be talking about, is the Iranian attack today, which we hear pretty much every day for the past 2 weeks, is it tomorrow? We will talk about the successful operations of the IDF in Iran and in Lebanon to prevent this, or at least mitigate it in advance. Yes, Daniel, you want to make a point before we go to Richard?
Yeah. So the idea of sort of like talking through media, I've experienced that, unfortunately, in the Slovak politics, where basically the politicians in the government were so like disapproving of each other that I basically stopped talking completely and would again just send messages through media. And when that starts happening, you just feel embarrassed, like what is actually going on when like politicians are hate each other, or in a sense have so much disagreements with each other that they don't even talk with each other directly. And I think this has been problem even before this. From what I understand, the war cabinet was supposed to, I think, meet like weekly or monthly, or basically they were supposed to have these meetings and these communications, and that also hasn't been happening for a while. I think at some point it was like it was really, I think, like and there was a while ago, so I don't remember exactly, but like weeks or even months where like Gallant and Netanyahu directly just didn't talk to each other. And again, that's a defense minister and a prime minister. These are the people who should be directing this war. These are basically the main people behind the operations, specifically the war cabinet. They have the war cabinet has been made to basically make decisions faster and make them better. And they are completely destroying the reason for making it when they just refuse to talk to each other. That is something that, and this coming to the fact that we know about it, the fact that we know about the fact that they are not even talking to each other. You just feel embarrassed, like what is even going on? Like have some dignity, Jesus.
Yeah, and I think if you're contrasting, it's worth contrasting these politicians in Israel with how the Hamas leadership itself works, because obviously that uses force and works through dictatorships in order to, and the rivalry between potential dictators in order to determine who leads an organization like that. So it's obviously a completely different category. But I mean, for example, in 2016, when Sinwar became the leader, in 2017 he became the leader. In 2016, the Hamas top commander Mahmoud Ishtaway was killed. And it's thought that that was Sinwar getting rid of his potential rival in order to lead Hamas. And of course, that's one reason why, when it comes to this meeting in Qatar that the BBC covered, that the guy who's less well known perhaps thinks, okay, well, perhaps I'll let Sinwar have it, because I mean, Sinwar is, let's face it, Hamas royalty. His brother Mohammed runs is the leader of the largest Hamas military battalion. The Mohammed Daif, his till recent deputy, who led the armed wing for a couple of decades. He was his neighbor and friend and classmate. He's right, always been there, right at the top. And it's no surprise. And of course, he's also, been using terror on the own population of Gaza as well. He's overseen all the executions of gays and adulterers, etc., that's taken place in Gaza. So there is a culture of dictatorship, force, and violence that runs right through this. So you've got that on the one hand, whilst you've got the bickering politicians of Israel on the other side. They're totally different categories of mistakes and evil, but it's none of it's very, very edifying.
And of course, is also the guy who said that the civilian deaths is a good thing for Hamas because highlights the issue. They were quick to deny and say, "Oh no, it didn't do it." Well, of course it did it, because although the leader of the government of Hamas, he doesn't care about using his rule in order to protect his own population. The reason for Hamas to exist is to kill the Jews, to destroy Israel. So lots of victims means lots of international attention. And that's exactly why Israel should have gone in straight away from October the 7th, October the 8th, and deal with it really forcefully and once and for all. What could have happened? Somebody could have reported to the ICJ, or somebody could have reported Netanyahu to the ICC. Well, it happened anyway. So there you go. Now you go same issues that you would have faced after without the result you could have had. And you were talking about the Palestinians, they're lying to us. Of course, they're lying to us. Palestinian itself is a lie. It's not such an ethnicity as Palestinian. Their refugee status is a lie because they have a special definition as refugees. And they even lie on when they call the areas refugee camps because everybody else calls them a city, with building made of bricks and stuff like that. So they made propaganda. They made lying to the West, and the West has made an art of sucking up to these kind of lies because they, I don't know, forward their own agenda. The media in the West are quite happy to take everything without any sort of double checking or criticism at all if it comes from the Palestinian side.
WUB gives a quote in the chat from a New York Times article from 2016 that says the death of Mahmoud Ishtawi, who was accused of homosexuality, had all the trappings of a soap opera: sex, torture, and embezzlement. First of all, I wonder what soap operas the New York Times watches. Like, those are daytime television shows. I don't know that they really have what the New York Times imagines goes on there. But yeah, I think there was some accusation, although this could be, Israeli stuff that is put out there to cause trouble, that Sinwar's brother was also, they found homosexual material in his home after they took it over. And of course, the fact that this is the kind of thing you get killed over in Gaza, again, would make you wonder why the West is supporting that side of this war and opposing the people who are defending themselves, because other than killing gay people in their own community, they also are attempting to kill all the Jews. But yeah,
the gays for Palestine didn't come out of the woodwork at that time, did they?
were there no gates for Palestine? No, I think there were. No, I have seen that at the time. They just weren't as big a deal as they are now. You know, it takes time to build a brand. But yeah, I had another point that I was going to make. I forgot what it was. Daniel, do you have something to say while I try to remember?
Yeah, I mean, one more point I wanted to make is I think Yahya Sinwar is a classic example of why do you need principles, and why oftentimes you won't really see the results of being unprincipled until way later. So, Yahya Sinwar basically wasn't as much important after he was released from prison, basically because I think he was very quickly arrested after joining Hamas, or like within a couple of years for what he has done. He has been jailed. But again, the fact that he was released and again and many other terrorists were released with him, but you probably unless you were being principled, you probably wouldn't expect that this like one guy would climb the ranks and become the military leader in Hamas and eventually commit or be behind October 7th. And after that, he would become the leader of Hamas. Again, this is not really something you could necessarily predict. But if you were principled at the time, if you knew that negotiating with Hamas, releasing these terrorists will only lead to more problems down the line, you're not only kicking the can down the road, but you are providing them with basically the tools they need to kill you later. So I think if I had to make one point from this whole thing, I think that would be the one that basically you need to act on principle, and oftentimes you won't see the consequences of being on principle until way later, but they will come.
Richard.
Yeah, absolutely agree with what Daniel just said there. It's a great point. I think one of the things about Sinwar and about the fact that Sinwar has a target on his head, as he should, for setting up the masterminding October the 7th. I hate the term masterminding. It's too generous a term, but for being behind October the 7th. The fact that if he were taken out and killed in the way that Dave has been killed and Hani has been killed, then obviously that would then be used to say, well, he's dead now. That will mark the end of one of the key goals of defeating Hamas, according to certainly Netanyahu. And of course, lots of the Western media would be all over it to say, well, now that he is dead, were that point to arise, that the goal of the war will be achieved, and that this will be over. But of course, it wouldn't be over. And the point here is it doesn't really matter who leads Hamas, so long as the ideology is as violent and evil as it is. As long as the base of it is so evil, there's a legion of people who can be replacements. They can be replacements at battalion level. They can be replacements at foot soldier level. They can be replacements at suicide bomber level, or they can be replacements at leadership level. And of course, you're talking about somebody who, as far as we know, based on what we know, still is in the tunnels within Gaza. So there are plenty of people, on hand, prepared to live in those tunnels and to take over the role in the future. So although we're focusing on Sinwar here, my point is that the one man element of it, having a wanted poster under his name, thinking that this is all about just him, would be a mistake, because it's so much deeper than that. and harder to stop.
And especially considering that a few months after he was released from the Israeli jail following the deal in 2011, he went and met with the Islamic Republic of Iran. He met with Soleimani. The general was blown up in 2017 or 18. And why did he meet with a member of the Revolutionary Guard of the Islamic Republic? Because they're behind it. Because they probably agree some kind of deal whereby they get funding, they get equipment, they get all sorts of stuff. I mean, it takes lots of effort, manpower, and money to dig hundreds of miles in tunnels in the desert. It's not something you do overnight. The other day, they even discovered a tunnel big enough to drive through with a lorry. All this kind of stuff required lots of money that they wouldn't have had unless it came through via, the only people who can afford to bankroll all this kind of stuff in the Middle East, Iran. Iran is behind Hezbollah. Iran is behind the Houthis. Iran is behind every single wacky Islamic-inspired monster on this planet. They in Germany recently they shut down a mosque because the imam in there was taking order from Iran. Here in Britain, we have mosques and imams that are funded by Iran, but we pretend it's just a right-wing issue, so we don't look at it until it's going to hit us literally in the face. As long as you keep appeasing these people, as long as you don't take them at face value, they tell us over and over and over again what they want to do. Once they're done with Israel, they're going to move towards the big Satan, the America and every other civilized place left on the planet. You just have to believe them. They are quite consistent and confident that they can do it. They don't have a crisis in not thinking in principle. They think in principle. Their principle is death.
Yeah, and remember, it has hit us here in the UK multiple times. Maybe, I don't know, not badly enough. Again, it's a question of how bad it is, how many people are dead before we respond. But even then, I don't know. Look, the fact that October 7th didn't change anything fundamental in Israel, in the one country that knows the issue of Islamic terrorism better than any other, I think it does not bode well for us. And yeah, back to Susie's question, I don't see a reason for optimism, although we are, we're trying to counter all the bad ideas out there. I do see it as a very long journey. Thank you, Jeff, for helping us along that journey with your super chat, and thank you, Aviva, for yours as well. And thank you, Bonnie, for saying great article, Razi. I appreciate that. I do praise it myself all the time, but it is better when that praise comes from others. Yeah, one of the things, and I mentioned this on the Daily Objective, but I'll repeat it because this could have been its own topic today, and maybe it will be in the coming days. Ukraine's really heroic, bold operation in Russia, the Gaza of Europe, and like, but with the difference of them being militarily stronger, and yet Ukraine, they know there are certain things they can't do in the war, and they rely on things like this that are surprising, that the enemy doesn't expect. And if only the West, first of all, fully supported Ukraine, but also encouraged Israel to do that. And if not, Israel could do that on its own and then see if it gets the response from the West that it appears to think it's going to get. It could be that America is bullying Israel into submission because Israel allows it. And maybe if Israel said, look, we want America's support, we value it, but we value our lives more. And if America's support comes with sacrificing the lives of our soldiers, our civilians, then we will choose to live over choose to die and have America weep for us. And if Israel did that, first of all, Israel, Israelis would be safer because their enemies. We go back to this, the fact that in the last couple of months there have been bolder operations by Israel, not nearly what we'd like to see, but look at the one against the Houthis. That was, we haven't heard from them since. We've heard from their spokesperson, but we haven't seen anything from them. That kind of stuff helps. If you harm your enemy's ability to kill you, you are basically reducing the likelihood of them killing you. So yeah, let's hope that Israel, at the very least, learns something from Ukraine and does some of what needs to be done. And if not, look, Israelis are still sitting and waiting and trying to see what's coming from Iran, which is not a recipe for long-term peace.
And
If I can, yeah, if I can build maybe on the Ukraine point a bit more, something I think that is similar, and I think why there is a problem with just sort of like targeting the Hamas leaders and expecting that basically if you just kill them, that's gonna be over. No, you have to target in a sense, the Palestinian spirit. You basically the people of Palestine, of the Palestinians want to fight against Israel, and again, you could kill their leaders, and new people are gonna come up. Again, it's not like now there are still some like seniors that have been basically in Hamas since it started, but new generations gonna become. I mean, even Hamas, you could consider Hamas itself the sort of like a new generation of fighting against against Israelis. Before Hamas, there were different groups. There's always gonna be something if basically the spirit, the sort of the idea behind Hamas still remains, which is always with the people. And sort of connecting it to Russia, I think the sort of the reason why we haven't seen a lot of protest in Russia against Putin is, to large part, the civilians there don't really feel the weight of the war. I mean, even when it comes to soldiers, many of them were conscripted, but Russia doesn't put those people on the actual front lines. When you're a conscript, you basically just stay in Russia, and the people who actually go into Ukraine are either from the sort of the private military groups or the volunteers, the sort of like professional soldiers. So I think that's why, and again, it would be a good episode. That's why I think the Kursk invasion, I think, is going to be really impactful, because the people there, they weren't professional soldiers, they weren't private military groups, they were the conscripts. So now the civilians will feel, you are at war, you've started the war against Ukrainians, and you're gonna feel it. And this is something I think is the most important part. My favorite example of this is always the Civil War in America, where the General Sherman, basically his idea was, you need to bring the war to the people. They need to know what they did, and they need to feel, so they can push. They basically the government, whoever is representing them, will feel the fact that what's going on. So I think this I think that's why I think whatever Israel's actions are against the leaders don't matter as much as what they actually do on the ground. Because again, Israel already was ruling Gaza. Israel had complete complete power over both Gaza and Judea and Samaria, West Bank of the Jordan River. They had complete control over both of them, yet they were still not able to, in a sense, integrate it again, because that Palestinian spirit was still there. The idea that wanting to kill Jews is an okay thing to hold, that was never crushed, and that's why this opposition still persists.
I agree with you, Daniel. Absolutely. I also think, though, that whilst agreeing with you, I also think that killing off the leadership of Hamas does have a morale impact on the Palestinians. And those two recent deaths of Deif and Haniyeh have knocked the Palestinian spirit back a bit, thankfully, because it does show that even these leaders aren't as powerful as they seem. And of course, where is Allah when their leaders get wiped out, which is a part of it as well. And if you look at Sinwar, though, you look at what Israel has done. Israel has done the exact opposite all the way along. It's cured his brain cancer. It's negotiated his release from 4 life sentences from its own prison, so that in exchange, together with over 1,000 other prisoners, it's disengaged from Gaza. In order to allow Gaza to run itself, and hopefully, that would make Palestinians pick freedom and peace. But obviously not. At every stage, when altruism is their motivation, the consequences come straight back, as the exploited evil always will, when faced with the chance to parasite off of the altruistic motives, declared altruistic motives of the good. And this is what's got us to this point. And now, surely, when Sinwar is now declared the Hamas leadership, how could you possibly negotiate with him over via a third party over the release of hostages? You absolutely should be aiming to wipe him out as the symbol that he is, in order to crush that Palestinian spirit, together with, as you're suggesting, Daniel, together with making sure that you're crushing it for the people themselves are feeling the full impact of the ideology which they are supporting, cheering for, and will be the endless victims of, so long as they continue to do so.
And of course, providing you maintain a hate to your enemy doesn't help either. You have to make sure that they feel the force of what they've done. They suffer the consequences of what the people that they voted for have done on their behalf. And again, let's not forget, the hostages are still held by the people who are not suffering enough. Because if they suffered enough, they will just give up. They will just surrender. They will just give in. Sinwar and all the hostages, they will just start telling the IDF soldiers, "Oi, go and get them there and there, stop bombing us." But it's not happening. Clearly, that Israel is spending way too much time, effort, and lives into trying to protect its own enemy. And until you stop doing that, you're never going to get rid of them. Never.
Just a quick point about Israeli politics, because if Netanyahu does go for a deal, at least in terms of what they say, although what politicians say is often not the same as what they do. Both Ben Gvir and Smotrich, with the backing of, I don't remember how many members of Knesset they have together, will leave the government. That is what they're saying. Now, then Netanyahu will have either an election on his hands, or he will have to be backed by the opposition, which some of them have said they would back him if that's what happens, but that's going to be interesting. The opposition up until October 7th was considered just the anti-Netanyahu side of the political map. So that's going to be very interesting to see. Now, if you look at polls, Netanyahu is much stronger, or stronger than he has been since October 7th. So maybe he's not that afraid of an election, but of course it depends on who exactly is running and in what formation. You never know that in Israeli politics until basically the deadline arrives to register your party to run. And there's all sorts of polls showing what might happen if Bennett runs as the head of his own party, or as the head of a party with Lieberman. So Netanyahu has a decision to make that might cost him what he holds dearest, which is his job as prime minister. So when people say Netanyahu doesn't really want a deal, of all the anti-Israel stuff I hear, I get that they mean something different, but it is possible that he doesn't want a deal because of what it does to his political career. And look, if that's what if that's I'll take it. Like if that's what we can get, as long as no such deal happens, and Hamas is seen as an enemy rather than a negotiating partner, then that is for the better. Either way, I'm sure it will give us, unfortunately, a lot of material for shows, not of the kind that we would like to do. Uh, maybe from time to time of the kind that we like to do, like insert terrorist name meets 72 virgins. That's kind of our template nowadays for a title, which we'd like to use a lot more. So Netanyahu, I know you're watching. If you can get on that, I'd appreciate it. Marco, Richard, where can people find more from you?
Check out the Briefly Objective, the sister channel to this. Details below where it says for shorter content, and we now have playlists there, so you can listen to whole batches of videos simultaneously. So create a sort of a mini documentary by listening to a bunch.
And check out the Substack as well.
Yeah, Marco has an article on Substack. Richard has one that is not yet published, but is going to be published in a few days. That will be both of those will be behind a paywall. But it's worth the money. Daniel.
You can find me as Damn10 on YouTube. Link for that is in the description.
I'm Razi Ginsburg on X, and my article on Substack is free for the time being, probably for a couple more days, and then it will take its rightful place behind a paywall. We will be back tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show. Midas Mulligan members should join the roundtable, which is starting in a couple of minutes. It's a big one. Substack is the biggest new thing we've launched in quite a while, but it won't be within a few months. So if you have access to that, join. If not, we will fill you in when we're ready to. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.